On today's episode, I'll be talking about the 1988 animated classic, The Land Before Time.
If you're looking for a man with no plans or programs, and he always leaves a chance to hold hands for romance. Are you looking for the Luke with an old man, a cold hands? It's a creature of the night who heads for his spotlight. I'm here to welcome you to Brandon at Random Reviews. No method when I choose. It's Brandon at Random Reviews. Yeah.
All right, everyone, welcome to Brandon at Random Reviews, covering one unsystematically chosen topic at a time. If you like listening to a guy recap and review movies in weekly episodes, then look no further. To keep up with the newest content, you can find Brandon at Random Reviews on most major video and audio platforms, as well as all popular social media sites. If you enjoy this, please like and subscribe. So as I mentioned, today's movie is The Land Before Time, released on November 18th, 1988, with a runtime of 69 minutes. This movie is rated G by the Motion Picture Association of America. Budget, $12.5 million. Directed by Don Bluth, who also directed An American Tail, and honestly, I think that might have been one of the first movies I ever saw as a child. I can't really be sure. I think my sister said the same thing, and I don't know if maybe someone was trying to make that happen, but I don't remember what year An American Tail came out, so I can't be really sure about everything. He also directed All Dogs Go to Heaven, which I don't think I've actually ever seen all the way through. I started watching it a while back, but it was kind of like one of those ones that it's like if you didn't see it as a child and you try and go back and watch it for the first time, it's not going to be as impactful as you want it to be. So it was kind of not something I could get into as much. And he also directed Anastasia with Meg Ryan as a voice actor. It's another really well animated movie. I just recently watched a video on the internet that was basically explaining that the story that movie tells, even though it's supposed to be based on real people, is not at all true. And basically all of the characters in that movie died in real life pretty much immediately where the events of that movie start. So it's kind of ridiculous. For the writers, I don't really have a whole lot to say about any of these writers. Judy Freudberg, Tony Geiss, and Stu Krieger, their filmographies were just not particularly great. They just didn't have any standout things. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to put them and not really go crazy. For the composer, we have James Horner, who I literally just covered. Apollo 13, he did that one as well. So he also did the music for Avatar, the James Cameron movie, which is massively overrated. And I still don't understand how they're so successful. It's like, it's got to be the international audiences because they obviously appeal to people in a very different way overseas. And so it's really tough to understand how it's one of, if not the highest grossing movie of all time. I can't be sure. He also did the He also did the music for the movie The Mask of Zorro, which, as I mentioned, I had a big crush on Catherine Zeta-Jones, and honestly, I still kind of do, but I really enjoyed that movie when I was a kid. I think I went back and watched it again a few years ago, and it wasn't as good as I remembered it being, but it was still really enjoyable. It was a good time. And he also did the music for Braveheart with Mel Gibson, and honestly, great fucking movie. It stands the test of time, even though it is wildly historically inaccurate. There's almost nothing that happens in that movie that is as historians have determined it to have been. For the cast, we have Pat Hingle, who plays the narrator / Rooter, who is a Scolosaurus. I want to be clear. I'm going to say these dinosaur names. I was never into dinosaurs as a kid, particularly. I just never got into them. And there are a lot of dinosaur names that I have never heard before I did this episode because they don't specifically say what they are. It's not like the dinosaurs within this story know what their scientific name is. But Pat Hingle was also in Batman, actually all four of the original Warner Brothers quadrilogy. He played Commissioner Gordon. He was kind of an iffy choice for Commissioner Gordon. I don't really think that if Tim Burton were as big of a comic book fan as he could have been, that he would have actually thought that was a good casting decision. And I think that that was one of the more mediocre things about all four of those movies was that Commissioner Gordon was just never that great. And we never got like a cool rooftop scene in those movies with Batman and Commissioner Gordon, where Commissioner Gordon is actually telling Batman what's going on with a case or something, or Batman is talking to him about anything. There's Batman Forever, where it's Chase Meridian lures Batman to the rooftop, but no Commissioner Gordon until the very tail end of that scene, and that wasn't really what that scene was about. Oh, and he was also in Maximum Overdrive, which is a Stephen King story movie from the 1980s, I believe, that has Emilio Estevez in it. Not only did Stephen King write the movie, it was not based on a book. He wrote it. As far as I know, it wasn't based on a book, and it was the only movie he ever directed. And I think it's pretty safe to say, I don't know this for sure, but I think it's safe to say that Stephen King was very much on coke when he was making that movie. It was so off the wall ridiculous. Basically, it's about machines coming to life and attacking people. There's a scene where a literal Coke machine attacks someone who is trying to buy a Coke. All sorts of things that are just insane. And it's one of those cult favorites. It's been covered on a lot of the quote unquote bad movie podcasts, but it's a good time. It's amusing. It's fun to watch. It's just crazy. And basically the whole plot of the movie is these semi trucks that have become sentient they take over a gas station and hold people hostage inside it. It's so fucking weird. Gabriel Damon plays Littlefoot, who is an Apatosaurus. I always remember these kinds of dinosaurs being referred to as brontosauruses when I was a kid. I don't know if I feel like I've heard that that's not an actual dinosaur type and it's not a technical name at all. It's just something that they started getting called, and I don't know what that's all about. But he was also in Newsies, which famously was one of Christian Bale's earlier roles when he was a child actor. I think it might have been after Empire of the Sun. I can't actually remember because I've never seen either of those movies. But Newsies is a musical. It's got those kids that wear the Peaky Blinders hats and they dance around and sing. It's a musical, for fuck's sake. I'm not fucking watching this movie. Oh, and he was also in RoboCop 2, which is not a great sequel. It's not a terrible sequel, though. It's pretty decent. I think that one still had Peter Weller in it. He didn't return for the third one. I am positive about that. But the second one was actually not like an awful movie. It was a classic example of one of those movies that should probably never have actually had a sequel, but they just made a sequel because the first one was successful. And it really, I don't think, went over well with critics. I mean, of course, it wasn't panned as much as the third one was, but I remember watching all of those movies just because when I saw the first RoboCop with my friend Brad, we went fucking apeshit for that movie. We thought it was the most amazing movie ever made. It was, and we were 100% correct about that, honestly. Helen Shaver plays Littlefoot's mother, who is also obviously an Apatosaurus. We don't have any interspecies erotica in this children's story. Candace Hudson plays Sarah, who is a Triceratops, and Sarah is spelled Cera, like in Triceratops. I have it noted here that Sarah is a big asshole piece of shit. Just wanted to mention that. I'll mention it several times later, but I wanted to get it out of the way early so that you knew how I felt and where I stood with Sarah. Judith Barcy plays Ducky, who is a Sorophus, I guess is the name of this species. Ducky is an adorable character. Really love Ducky. Please, for the love of God, if you don't know anything about this actress, don't do what I did the first time I revisited this movie years ago and look up any information on what happened to her. Because I watched this movie and it was a revisit for me. It must have been 15 years ago now, but it had been since I was a child since I had last seen it. And I thought, oh God, wouldn't it be cool if I looked up what happened to all these child actors who voiced these dinosaurs in this movie to see what they're up to today? Did they ever make anything of themselves in the industry? I can just promise you, you don't want to know what happened to Judith Barcy. Nothing good will come of it. So just don't. I may decide to share that information, even though there are millions of vertical videos on TikTok and Instagram, etc., where you can look up and find. I really recommend Ray William Johnson. Yeah, Ray William Johnson. He's a great storyteller and he has a lot of great, basically like true story, crime type stories where he uses AI cartoon animations to illustrate his stories. And he does a really good one explaining what's going on or what happened with Judith Barcy. And then we have Will Ryan, who plays Petrie, who is a pteranodon. And I thought forever that Petrie was a pterodactyl, and I don't know if maybe that's another brontosaurus type thing where there is no real pterodactyl in the dinosaur kingdom, and maybe it's just like a made up term because pteranodon it's got the PT start to it, which is confusing, but it is spelled in a similar way. For casting notes, I don't really have any casting notes. I imagine this was probably just a bunch of unknown child actors or relative unknown child actors. Didn't really find much information on this casting process. For the plot synopsis, a young dinosaur teams up with other young dinosaurs of different species in order to reunite with their families in a distant land called the Great Valley. For the tagline, a new adventure is born. Kind of generic, not really a huge fan of that one. Don't really know what would have been better, but hey, what can you do? Alright, guys, let's just dive right into the plot of this motherfucking movie. So, it's strange because this movie starts underwater, but I can remember this beginning sequence so vividly from my childhood. All the bubbles are slowly crawling up to the surface as the credits begin, and it finally starts panning across the underwater scenery as creatures are chasing after one another. You see a group of sea turtles swimming along as we remain underwater. The narrator begins explaining that this was a long time ago, but not in a galaxy far, far away, rather on this Earth, long before the existence of human beings. He explains the dinosaurs roamed the Earth and there were two different kinds of dinosaurs, even though that's pretty reductive in my opinion. But he basically groups them into carnivores and herbivores, and we see the Apatosaurus family walking and basically just a variety of different dinosaurs around. We see the birth of one of the dinosaurs named Ducky as she hatches from an egg, and honestly, Ducky is so fucking cute. It kind of pisses me off a little bit. She is a Seraphis. I didn't look up the pronunciation of that, and I feel like an idiot because it's probably the wrong pronunciation. Seraphis or Seraphis, and luckily I don't have to say it too much, so I don't feel that bad. She almost immediately begins chasing things around, and her parents have to pick her up and bring her back to the nest with her brothers and sisters. A family of Triceratops watch the hatching of their daughter Sarah, but it's spelled Cera, as I mentioned, like in Triceratops. And I'm just going to I'm going to preface any other explanation of her character, as I already kind of did, by telling you right now that she is a complete and total fuckface asshole brat piece of shit, but I feel like that's not really aggressive enough. It's explained that there are some creatures that will seek out the eggs of the unborn, and we watch one egg fall down from a nest. It's a family of Apatosauruses, and as the egg hatches, we see our protagonist, Littlefoot, who is quickly greeted by his mother, and his mother legitimately licks the absolute shit out of him, I guess as a way to clean him up and greet him. At this point, she's seemingly like 80 times his size. Littlefoot is the only baby that his family has, and he is initially a little frightened by the other creatures around him when they approach him, and his mom just tries to like comfort him basically. Littlefoot nestles up against his mother's ginormous feet and continually slips and trips and falls over himself before his mother finally picks him up with her teeth and places him on her back. And honestly, Littlefoot is cute as shit too. And honestly, his mother has such a comforting, soft voice, which is good because even though his grandparents are there admiring him as well, they never actually talk to my recollection in this movie, not even a little bit. They make like some random noises here and there, but not actual speaking. You know what I was just thinking is this mother's voice kind of reminds me, what was the lady's name on Muppet Babies? Like the lady that was like she like the house where the Muppet Babies lived, like she was the lady that you only ever saw her legs and that was it, and you could hear her speaking. I want to say she sounds like she has that kind of voice. But Littlefoot just nestles up inside some loose skin on his mom's back and takes a little nap because he's still a little baby. Sometime later, Littlefoot has grown up a little bit, but he's still very much a kid, and he's asking his mother why they have to walk around so fucking much. And honestly, this is a big struggle as a kid because once you have to walk for yourself, it seems like everyone else can do it so much, but it just wears you right out to do it as much as they do. And she explains to him that it's very important that they keep walking so that they can find food and healthier places to live, because it's also pretty important to mention that basically a lot of where the dinosaurs are in this movie is pretty much a barren wasteland. She reaches up with her huge neck and grabs a giant leaf from the trees above and gives it to Littlefoot and explains to him that it's called a tree star. And I just love the confusing but somehow amusing way language works for animals in a lot of animated movies where they can talk and it's like they know exactly what some things are called for no reason, but then they have no idea what other things are called and have to give them bizarre names that don't really make a ton of sense. Like with this, she knows what a tree is called, and she clearly knows what a star is, but she somehow has no idea what a leaf is, so she calls it a tree star because it came from a tree and it resembles a star, or at least a drawn one, which she would never actually have ever seen. It probably, I would say, doesn't look at all like a real star. She says that the tree star will help him grow, and he plays around with it, but doesn't actually eat it and just kind of wears it like a very ill-fitting poncho. His mother tells him about some kind of great valley that is a very long way away, and she explains that there are tons of tree stars there as he just admires the one that she just gave him. She says that the Great Valley is a promised land, and it has all sorts of green food and water that is so abundant that no one could ever possibly eat or drink it all. He asks her how long they will have to walk to get there, and she looks up at the sun that is beginning to set, and she says that the big red circle in the sky must pass over them many times, but they will follow it to where it touches the ground at the end of each day to get to the Great Valley, and they'll use it as a guide. Littlefoot asks her if she's ever seen the Great Valley, and she says no, and he skeptically asks her how she even really knows it actually exists. Totally fair question. And she explains that some things you see with your eyes and other things you see with your heart. And he tells her that he doesn't understand that, but she recognizes that he's just a kid and she hasn't fully indoctrinated him into believing in things for absolutely no reason. Littlefoot looks over and sees a triceratops named Sarah and her family, and she gets sprayed by a bug. And Littlefoot laughs hysterically at her because, I mean, look at her stupid face. She asks him what he's looking at, and they just start to playfully charge toward each other, but Sarah's father intervenes and stops her, and he says his phrase, "Three horns never play with long necks," which, even though this predates humans by millions of years, it's almost comforting to realize that systemic prejudices have existed for that long, and it's great to know that even these creatures might be willing to hate each other for pretty much no reason, much like people still seem to do today. Littlefoot asks his mother what a long neck is, and she says that that's what they are, and he asks why he's not allowed to play with three horns because they were just having some fun. Basically, his mother explains to him that the different groups of dinosaurs always stick to their own kinds and don't mix together because that's just how it's always been. Littlefoot becomes frustrated by this because he just wants to play with the other kids that are his age and doesn't care about the differences that him and the other dinosaurs might have. But it's like frustrating because obviously dinosaur racism is everyone's way of life, and just because he's the only child Apatosaurus in the group, that doesn't mean that he needs to start preaching acceptance and diversity out of nowhere. His mother reveals a lot of critical information about how far away they still are from the Great Valley. She even details some of the landmarks to expect along the way, like a great rock that looks like a long neck and the mountains that burn. But she explains to him that when they get there, there will be plenty of other long necked kids for him to play with, but to most kids, that would seem like an eternity to wait for. He already has no idea. She just said the sun has to pass over them many times, which really just would seem like forever. Of course, he just wants to get there and really doesn't want to wait for their whole journey to finally be over to make it to the Great Valley. Late at night, while his family is sleeping, Littlefoot encounters a bullfrog who eats an insect in front of him, and he chases after it excitedly, but he runs into Sarah again, who stops him and tells him that the frog is hers, and I can't stress to you what a complete asshole Sarah is. Like, she clearly didn't see this frog until just now. The two of them go down and play in this swampy area, and they have a really good time there for only a few moments before the shadow of a creature appears nearby, a massive creature. The two of them realize they're in danger as a Tyrannosaurus Rex starts stomping toward them. They refer to him as a sharp tooth, and both of them flee and try and escape into this dried out forest area, and the sharp tooth attempts to sniff them out. And honestly, I do remember this being really terrifying as a kid because the T-Rex gets down really close to them, and he clearly doesn't, like, he can't see them very well, and you can see his breath breathing down on them. Sarah very stubbornly assumes that she knows the right way to get away from the sharp tooth, but Littlefoot knows better, and he has to go after her to try and save her. And of course, the sharp tooth almost gets them, and Littlefoot ends up getting caught in some vines or roots temporarily, but they break free, and suddenly Littlefoot's mother intervenes and knocks down the sharp tooth and tells the two kids to run away because it's pretty clear even she's afraid of this thing. And she begins fighting with Sharptooth and attempting to flee. And this whole time, I'm kind of like, hey, where the fuck is Sarah's family? They'd be super helpful right now. Obviously, longnecks are not predatory or as strong as T-Rex would be, so she struggles quite a bit and finally knocks down Sharptooth again. But she appears to be injured already as an earthquake begins, and the earth separates between Littlefoot's feet. Like, he basically, when it separates, he's standing on either side of the separation, like this crack in the earth. So now his mother is separated from the two of them who are stuck on the same side as Sharptooth and are about to fall down a cliff as the earth is turning into rubble beneath them, and his mother desperately tries to go after, and she manages to catch both of them before they fall to their death. And it does seem as though Sharptooth pretty well probably perished when he fell. And it's also pretty clear that Littlefoot's mother is hurt, but the narrator chimes in and explains that this great earthquake happened during the separation of the continents. He says that many families and herds were divided by it, and Littlefoot was separated at this time from his grandparents. Sarah was also separated from her family, and it really tears you apart because they can't even see, or they can even see each other. They're like looking at each other from across both sides of this giant gorge that is formed between the two divided land masses. After nightfall, Littlefoot is looking for his mother and desperately calling out to her everywhere until he finally sees her in the distance, but she's in really bad shape and she's lying on the ground and can barely even lift her head. He asks her to stand up, but she says that she's not sure she can, and she falls down in front of him, and we get the most heartbreaking scene possibly in all of cinema. I'm not sure. There are a lot of heartbreaking scenes out there, but this is pretty fucking tragic. She asks him if he can remember how to get to the Great Valley, and he says he guesses he does, but he doesn't understand why he should have to remember if they're both going together. He says that she'll be with him, and she explains to him that she'll be with him even if he can't see her, but he doesn't really understand what she means by that, which only makes this more devastating to watch because she's basically explaining to Littlefoot that not only has he been separated from the rest of his family, but his own mother is now dying in front of him, and after having saved his life, and he'll be forced to go off on his own to try and find this Great Valley place that might not even exist. She tells him to let his heart guide him, and his heart may whisper, so he needs to listen closely. He says "mother" one last time, but she doesn't answer, and eventually he walks away and stumbles down a hill. He lands on a creature named Rooter, who doesn't really look like any of the other dinosaurs we've seen so far. He's a Scolosaurus, but he's voiced by Pat Hingle, who is also our narrator, and he asks poor Littlefoot what's going on and what he's doing, and Littlefoot cowers away in fear with tears in his eyes, and Rooter asks him why he's crying because he's not hurt physically, at least not that he can see, and Littlefoot explains to him what happened to his mother, and Rooter tries to comfort Littlefoot by telling him that the great circle of life has begun. Littlefoot, of course, is very sad and tells Rooter he doesn't know what to do and that he misses his mother already. Rooter, of course, just explains that this is completely natural and he will probably always miss her at least a little bit. But he explains to Littlefoot that she will always be with him wherever he goes, as long as he remembers her through the things that she taught him and their time together. He says the two of them will remain a part of each other forever. And I'm glad that this dude isn't a dinosaur racist like everyone else, because holy shit, Littlefoot really needed this wholesome pep talk here. Littlefoot explains that he has a tummy ache, and the old man tells him that that too will pass in time, but it's going to keep hurting for a while. And it's weird because there's this imagery that I see that I remember so vividly from watching this child. It happens like right after he talks to Rooter. Like this baby pteranodon pulls a cherry from a branch and then falls down and fights over the cherry with some other babies like him. And they keep popping in and out of this little tree, you know, like the little holes in the tree. And eventually it winds up being a whole big crowd of these pteranodon babies, and multiple times they think they've successfully gotten the cherry for themselves. Then finally, some other large creature comes and snatches it away with his tongue, and they're all pretty bummed out about it. But then the mother of all these little pteranodons pops up and has a giant platter of these cherries that she presents to them. But I'm also looking around at this barren wasteland and wondering what the fuck this family of pteranodons is going to do for food after these cherries are eaten, because there's not jack shit for vegetation anywhere else around there, and it seems like maybe they should already be rationing food. All of these little pteranodons proudly march down past Littlefoot, who is laying on the ground depressed about his mom still. The narrator explains that for a while Littlefoot could only think about his mother as one of the baby pteranodons stops by Littlefoot and offers him one of the cherries, but he doesn't take it because he's just too sad. Slowly we see the descent of a tree star that falls down toward Littlefoot, who is struggling in a giant footprint and trying to use it to rest in. And the tree star finally lands in the footprint, and the water pools inside it, and Littlefoot looks into the water and he can see himself in the reflection. Then suddenly he can hear his mother's voice talking to him, asking him if he remembers the way to the Great Valley. And he shakes his head, so she recites her instructions from earlier by telling him he is supposed to follow the Great Red Circle until he passes the giant rock that looks like a long neck and sees the mountains that burn. She explains to him that she'll be in his heart and that he needs to let his heart guide him. Then he eventually grabs the tree star and carries it away with him and treasures the fuck out of it because he considers it a gift from his late mother. And later on, he has it on his head, and honestly, there is yet another soul-crushing moment where he looks over and believes he sees his mother. So then as he runs down toward what he sees, it's revealed that even though he thinks he sees his mother, it's just his own shadow. So obviously it looked much larger than him initially. But this little tiny dinosaur is so overjoyed to think that it's his late mother and she's alive yet again. And it's not until he is legitimately licking his own shadow on this rock formation that he finally realizes it's not actually her. The narrator explains that the journey to the Great Valley would be important, but that it's just that Littlefoot must make it there or the chain of life will be broken. So basically, he's saying Littlefoot's bloodline will end if he dies. And I'm like, yeah, I know that feel, bro. The chain of life ends with me too, most likely. Suddenly, Littlefoot sees Sarah climbing along the ledge where the land divided earlier and they got separated from their families. She proclaims to Littlefoot that she intends to walk down the cliff that she is on and try and get to the other side and walk up on the other side the way she walked down this cliff. Littlefoot kindly tries to explain to her that she can't possibly do this, like it's not physically possible for her to make this climb and accomplish what she's trying to do. But of course, fuckface that Sarah is, She says that maybe he can't make the climb, but she knows that she can, and she echoes her father's discriminatory sentiment about three horns not needing help from long necks. And I'm going to tell you, the amount of times that Littlefoot has to let Sarah fuck herself over in this movie with her own arrogance is remarkable, because he even pitches the idea of trying to find the Great Valley that his mother told him about together and basically work as a team, but she acts way too good for him, and she even kicks some dirt into his face before slipping and falling and sliding all the way down to the bottom of this gorge. Littlefoot shouts down to her and says that at least if they walked together, they wouldn't both be alone, but Sarah explains that when she eventually finds her sisters, she won't be alone, and then she walks away into the darkness at the bottom of the gorge, thinking that somehow she's going to be able to climb back to the top on the other side, and it's like, nah, Sarah, you are dumb as shit. Then Littlefoot just has to slowly wander away, more bummed out than he was before, even though Sarah just paid him the world's greatest favor by not giving him her company. He's just too blinded by grief to realize what a favor she's done for him. Because no one on Earth would ever want to travel with that piece of shit to any destination, near or far. It cuts to a very small dinosaur that we saw in the beginning, who is named Ducky, and she is underwater swimming, and Ducky is a Seraphis, still fucking bothering me. Then she surfaces next to a rock where Littlefoot is laying on the ground and just very sad. And honestly, Ducky is just the cutest little thing, and she is just so funny and cheerful, happy, optimistic. Too pure for this world, I'd say. She smiles in his face and says hello and asks him what his name is, but he won't answer her because he's still so stricken with grief and loss. She suggests that maybe he cannot talk yet, and before she can say anymore, he's like, don't you know anything? Long necks don't talk to, well, whatever you are. But despite being significantly smaller than Littlefoot is, and clearly not of the same species, she insists that she actually is a long neck, and she attempts to stretch out her neck to prove it. Of course, Littlefoot just rolls his eyes because he knows that she's full of shit, and she finally admits that she's actually not a long neck and she's really a big mouth. She explains that she is all alone and that she also lost her family in the big earth shake, as she calls it, like everyone else did. Littlefoot asks Ducky if she would like to come with him, and she enthusiastically says, oh yes, but immediately catches herself and stops being so excited because, yep, you gotta temper those emotions. He explains to Ducky that she will have to keep up if she wants to come with him, and she assures him that she can definitely keep up. Ducky's most common catchphrase is, yep, 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 and she really just has a tendency to repeat stuff multiple times, usually 3 times, but she's fucking adorable. She finally introduces herself to him, and the two of them jump around and play on the ground like they're having a game of prehistoric hopscotch between the cracks in the rock. And she has already lifted Littlefoot's spirits significantly as he laughs and she runs between his legs. But Littlefoot's stomach growls and he grabs a tree branch with his mouth to eat it, but as soon as he does, something cries out and Ducky thinks that the tree is talking. Suddenly a very small winged creature falls down out of the branch and into a small hole, and Ducky looks down inside it and greets the creature. The little pteranodon introduces himself as Petrie, and Ducky proclaims that that's a funny name, and it's like, okay, Ducky. Petrie has a very unusual sounding voice, and almost immediately he asks if he actually flew by saying, I flied? But Ducky stops him to correct him by saying that he falled. And she asks him how he got all the way up in the tree, and he just says that he climbed up there. Littlefoot explains to Petrie that he is indeed a flyer and not a faller, but Petrie explains that flying is very hard to do and that he has not really learned how to yet. But they both explain to Petrie that neither of them are able to fly at all, even if they tried as hard as they could, so he's at least got that over them. It cuts back to Sarah, who has reached the bottom of the gorge and has been traveling around, and she runs into the body of Sharptooth, who fell down there when Littlefoot's mother pushed him. When Sarah sees him for the first time, she idiotically screams, but he doesn't wake up, and then also she decides that it would be a good idea now that she presumes that he's dead to just taunt the shit out of him. Like, she just runs into him multiple times and nothing happens, and then she backs way up so that she can charge toward him. But as she starts running in his direction, Sharptooth's eye opens up and Sarah sees this and scrambles to stop before colliding with him. The Sharptooth fully wakes up and begins to stand up and knocks over a bunch of rocks while he does it. Then it cuts back to Littlefoot and the gang slowly walking, and Petrie climbs up onto Littlefoot's head and covers Littlefoot's eyes while he's walking. Littlefoot, of course, gets irritated by Petrie because Petrie thinks that Littlefoot's head is just a place to sit and rest while Littlefoot just carries him. And also, Petrie is fucking up Littlefoot's tree star pretty fucking bad, and Ducky has to explain to Petrie that the tree star is a very important thing and was a gift from Littlefoot's mother. Ducky tries to task Petrie with protecting the tree star, so Petrie rolls it up and starts pacing back and forth, holding it like a Revolutionary War musket as he carries it. But Littlefoot finally proclaims that he's not a carrier and that Petrie should attempt to fly, so Littlefoot starts sprinting in hopes of giving Petrie a running start to actually fly. But Petrie starts to panic and doesn't want to fly because he's scared, even though Ducky is trying to cheer him on and be really supportive. Petrie points out that there is danger ahead, and the three of them see that there is a small dinosaur skeleton of some sort at the bottom of the hill they're on. Littlefoot falls down and becomes trapped inside of the skeleton's ribcage and is running around and eventually comes back and collides with Sarah, who has intersected with their travel path. He knocks her over onto the ground, and in his surprise to see her, he asks her what happened, but she's way too pissed off at this point about being knocked over. Littlefoot asks her why she's so frightened, and she laughs and very coyly says, "Me? Frightened? I'm not frightened. Why are you so frightened?" But Littlefoot declares that they are not frightened, and Ducky confirms that they are not scared at all. She tells them that they should be because she could be with the other three horns, but she came back to warn them all that she met the Sharptooth, which is what they call the T-Rex. But Littlefoot calls her on her bluff because he believes that the Sharptooth died when it fell. Sarah proceeds to make up some long, obviously bullshit story about how she had some sort of voluntary physical altercation with the Sharptooth as the primary aggressor, like she was initiating it. Like, okay, Sarah, sure you did, you lying shit. And of course, because Ducky isn't wise to Sarah's nonsense, she takes it as some sort of wonderful, brave story where Sarah was a hero of some sort. Suddenly, Sarah jumps on the log that Ducky is standing on and catapults Ducky an absurd distance through the trees. But when Ducky lands, she finds some kind of bizarre egg hidden in the weeds that begins hatching, and we're all introduced to Spike. Spike is a stegosaurus who doesn't talk at all, but eats so much more than anyone else to compensate for his lack of speech. And as he breaks out of his egg, he slowly consumes all of the weeds that were concealing the location of his egg, and then he promptly goes to sleep after, which is honestly such an amazing set of life priorities. I can't even really believe it. He's so young, too, to just have his head on such a straight and narrow type thing. So the narrator explains that this ragtag group of dinosaurs from different backgrounds and upbringings is trekking across the landscape to get to the Great Valley together. He explains that they know that if they lost their way, they would starve or have an encounter with Sharptooth. Littlefoot tries to hypothesize as they come to a small stream that maybe they should follow the path of the stream because he knows that a lot of tree stars grow where there is a lot of water nearby. Littlefoot asserts that he smells something, but he doesn't know what, and he looks over and sees a small cluster of trees down below where they are, and Sarah falsely asserts that it must be the Great Valley, and she proudly and arrogantly proclaims that she found it, even though she totally fucking didn't. But suddenly the earth begins to shake, and you don't really know if it's going to be another earthquake or what's going on at all. And they begin to approach the trees, but a moment later, a large crowd of dinosaurs crashes through nearby and devours all of the greenery on the trees that they were pretty stoked about getting to. Sarah angrily shouts out that the group of dinosaurs eating the leaves on the trees are being greedy and selfish, and she asks, what about her? All of them are, of course, very upset that they missed their opportunity to eat because they're all very hungry, and Littlefoot clarifies that this was definitely not the Great Valley. But I'm very confused because the creatures that eat all of the greens on the trees appear to be the same species as Littlefoot, but he doesn't actually even get excited or suggest the possibility that he could get help from them or anything, and clearly they didn't seem to want to help him anyway as they scurry off. They walk down toward the trees anyway, and Ducky is giving Petrie a pep talk about how plenty of things don't fly, such as trees, rocks, sticks, etc. And Ducky is so much more entertaining to me because you can tell it's actually a young child actor playing the part, and she has such enthusiasm. They approach a very tall tree, and Ducky climbs on Littlefoot's head with Petrie, and Littlefoot climbs on top of Spike, and they all attempt to create a ladder so that they can reach the leaves at the top of the tree. Sarah laughs at them and makes fun of how stupid they look, but they eventually begin to shake loose some of the leaves from the top of the tree, and Spike can't resist eating them as they fall through the air, and he's still holding everybody up. And this ultimately results in them all toppling and landing in a heap on the ground. But they realize that plenty of leaves fell off, and they can't eat them all now, or they can eat them all now, excuse me. Littlefoot kindly offers some of these leaves to Sarah, but she explains that she can get her own green food, and she attempts to run into a tree, like by ramming it with her head to make the leaves fall out of it, very unsuccessfully. But then, in some kind of misguided attempt to make her feel better, Littlefoot takes some of the leaves from his pile and throws them down toward her so that she thinks that her effort was successful. And she proudly eats a bunch of the leaves and rubs it in his face, and she boasts about how she's not afraid to be alone as she walks off in another direction and comes to rest on a small rock formation and proclaims that she's also not afraid of Sharptooth. Despite Littlefoot insisting that there is no Sharptooth anymore, it still worries Ducky and everyone except Littlefoot, and they basically all just like go out, except for Littlefoot. They all go out and sleep by Sarah for some reason, but Littlefoot has to huddle by himself in what appears to be a mound of dirt. Eventually, the other three snoring makes it difficult for Ducky to fall asleep, and she has to walk all the way over by Littlefoot and rest with him. And it's this really cute moment for like just a second, but then Spike and Petrie show up, and Sarah wakes up all alone and gets very sad as she realizes that she's just by herself, and she begrudgingly walks over toward the other four. The view is shown from above them, and it reveals that the mound of dirt that they're sleeping on is actually one of Sharptooth's footprints, so it's this massive footprint that they're sleeping in. The next morning, Sarah wakes up and she tries to wake up the rest of them, but Littlefoot just assumes she's being a jerk again, which is totally fair. But Sarah is legitimately panicking and trying to get them to run away, and Littlefoot is yelling at her before a shadow is cast over all of them, and they realize that Sharptooth is right behind them. Sharptooth begins chasing them across the wasteland, and they get captured briefly in a rock formation before Sharptooth crashes into them and knocks them through the other side of it. But luckily, this kind of traps Sharptooth in like this rock formation, like he gets his head stuck in there essentially. Then when Littlefoot looks up, he sees a rock that looks like a long neck and realizes that they must be going the right way because that's what his mother said he would see along the way. But of course the situation is very dire for all of them as they're getting malnourished and are all very tired, but Littlefoot insists that they must just keep going because they're getting close. So he urges them that if they can just make it to the top of one of the mountains, that the Great Valley is probably just on the other side, but when they get to the top of the nearest mountain, it's just more rocks and barren wasteland on the other side, and Sarah angrily declares that she's leaving because she can't believe how stupid Littlefoot is. But Littlefoot insists that they have to keep following the bright circle in the sky, but Sarah says that she's taking the easy way for once. But Littlefoot declares that that's the wrong way and that his mother says that this is the way they're supposed to go. And Sarah declares that she, being Littlefoot's mom, must be a dumb long neck too, which of course angers Littlefoot, and he insists that she take back what she said, but she just won't. So then they get into a little bit of a tussle and they end up falling down to the other side of the mountain, and the two of them begin fighting really pretty hard. Eventually, Spike, Ducky, and Petrie all fall down there too and watch as Littlefoot and Sarah just fight each other. Eventually, Sarah unfortunately gets the best of Littlefoot, who is of course very emotional and upset Then Littlefoot declares that Sarah should just go on her own way because none of them wanted her to come with them anyway. But Ducky points out that Sarah's way is much easier, which of course frustrates Littlefoot, and he ends up bitterly having to walk up the mountain on his own as the other three go in Sarah's direction. But it shows the four of them walking, and there's a bunch of lava and scary stuff going on, and Ducky says she wishes Littlefoot was with them, but Sarah is of course too proud to admit the error of her ways and is quite prepared to doom them all as she just jumps across a gap in the rocks. And when she does, Petrie falls down into this really thick oil and can't get back up, and Ducky and Spike end up stuck on rocks that are sitting in the lava. Littlefoot comes back and knocks down a rock so that he can get over toward them and save them. Then the three of them all band together to save Petrie from the oil, but they're having a very hard time getting out of it because it's very sticky. Meanwhile, Sarah is off on her own, and she is confronted by a group of scary predatory dinosaurs who are roughing her up. Like, they have these weird shell head type things. I don't know what the fuck they are. And just as she's bracing for certain death, a very strange, monstrous looking thing approaches and starts making bizarre noises and causes the scary dinosaurs to just flee. Sarah huddles down on the dirt and covers her eyes like the bitch ass that she is and awaits her fate. Then, just as the creature picks up Sarah and she begins screaming bloody murder and crying out for help, Littlefoot reveals that it is the four of them stacked on top of each other covered in that oil, and Sarah has to accept that she looks like a complete dumb shit because she was so scared. But Sarah ends up storming off in anger as the four others plead for her to come back, but she just won't listen to them. And the narrator chimes in to point out that Sarah is still too proud to admit that she went the wrong way, and Sarah collapses on the ground and begins crying. But let me tell you right now, this movie has made me experience the complete range of human emotions, but I have no desire to spare an ounce of pity for Sarah. Just want to be 100% on that. The other four are cleaning themselves off in the water, and suddenly they can hear a loud screeching and growling and assume it's Sharptooth nearby. Littlefoot looks over and sees him and declares that they need to get rid of him once and for all. He points out that with his tiny arms, a T-Rex should not be able to swim, so he wants to lure Sharptooth down toward the water and then knock a giant boulder onto his head, and Littlefoot suggests that they use Ducky as bait. So she very nervously has to sneak up behind Sharptooth while he's in a cave and then scream to get his attention, but when she does it, she hides behind a rock and loses sight of him, and he manages to sneak up behind her and start chasing her. She leads him down to the water and manages to get away, and Littlefoot and Spike attempt to push a boulder off the top of the cliff above the water to murder Sharptooth. Petrie taunts Sharptooth by throwing a rock down at him and legitimately almost dies as he falls off of his ledge laughing. Somehow Sharptooth manages to climb all the way up to where the boulder is, and it looks pretty bad, but Sarah does show up out of nowhere and helps them knock Sharptooth off along with the boulder. Sharptooth falls down into the water, but he brings Petrie with him, and the boulder falls on top of him in the water, and neither of them seem to surface afterwards. But so, like, basically all of these four remaining dinosaurs look down with very sad expressions as they assume that Petrie didn't make it, and as Ducky is starting to get tears in her eyes, Petrie winds up crawling up onto the ledge, revealing that he is still alive, and Ducky is overjoyed as she just grabs him and carries him away to go back with the others. Littlefoot looks up in the sky and sees a bunch of clouds, and he hears his mother's voice, and he begins apologizing to her, saying that he thought he was going to be able to find the Great Valley, but before he knows it, the clouds disappear and he cries out, telling them not to go. I want to be clear, like, it's like a red sky with these clouds in it, and the clouds look suspiciously like Littlefoot's mother and grandparents and stuff. Then he attempts to chase the clouds over several hills and mountains, and then he reaches the top of one and he looks over at the clouds, and the one that looks the most like his mother lets a light shine through, and the ray of light points down to the ground and reveals the Great Valley is below. Littlefoot calls out to the others to come over near him and see what he's seeing, and they're all overjoyed to see the Great Valley that is rich and green as Littlefoot's mother had told him it would be. The narrator chimes in and explains that the Great Valley was all that they dreamed it would be, as it shows them running around and playing with each other, and they find their respective family members, and they're all very happy to see them, of course. And naturally, Littlefoot finds his grandmother and grandfather, who legitimately, like I said, never say a single word in this entire movie, not even now to rejoice in seeing their grandson again, who they probably thought was dead. And we even get a flashback from the very beginning of the movie with Littlefoot being born, and it basically shows all of these happy scenes that they went through together, even going so far as to show things that happened only moments ago, like the clouds that look like Littlefoot's mom. The narrator explains that the five of them all would eventually keep passing on the story of how they made it to the Great Valley together, but honestly, it seems like there's gonna have to be a lot more reform before we see an end to all of the prejudice that's going on from one herd of dinosaurs to another. And we roll credits. Okay, so trivia for this movie. Throughout production, the film underwent severe cutting and editing of footage. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas thought that some scenes in the movie would appear too dark and intense for young children. Spielberg told Don Bluth while looking at the scenes from the film, "It's too scary. We'll have kids crying in the lobby and many angry parents. You don't want that." About 19 scenes comprising 10 minutes of footage, mostly pertaining to the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the five characters in mild peril or distress, were cut or trimmed from the movie. Bluth was unhappy with the cuts and fought to keep the footage, but felt like he had to do so, making this film only 69 minutes, one of his shortest feature-length films. He claims to have a personal copy of the film reel with the whole thing, though no word on whether or not it will ever see the light of day has been made. It was the highest grossing animated film of all time until The Little Mermaid in 1989. Old Rooter didn't appear in the original script, but was added to soften the blow of the death of Littlefoot's mother. Outside of the Indiana Jones films, this is the only film to be co-produced by both George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. An astounding 13 sequels have been made, as well as 8 games, 2 sing-along videos, and a TV series, and they're all absolutely terrible. I remember as a little kid, I thought, oh my god, more Land Before Time? How amazing would that be? Not. They're all fucking musicals. They say 13 sequels, but if I recall correctly, from the jump, every sequel was a literal musical, and I have no idea why they made that decision. Pizza Hut once ran a promotion involving the characters. If you spent a certain amount on pizza, you could receive a free hand puppet of one of the characters. When the film was first released on video, there was also a commercial for Pizza Hut, which played before the movie started. How exciting. What are the odds? While he doesn't dislike the film, Don Bluth credits it with kickstarting his weaker output, as it was his first significant exposure to studio interference. 29 species of animals were featured in this film. 5 of them were already extinct by the time the movie was set. During development, Sarah started out as a male triceratops called Bambo. It was George Lucas's idea to make Sarah a female. During production of An American Tail from 1986. Oh, well, there you go. That was what year it was. Talk began of the next feature with Steven Spielberg. He wanted to do a film similar to Bambi, but with dinosaurs. And that's how I've seen this described a lot when I was looking up stuff for this movie, is like, basically it is Bambi with dinosaurs. I would say it's far better done than that. I think that that's pretty it's kind of a backhanded thing to say, even though I think people regard Bambi very well. Bambi is not a very good movie. It's got funny and memorable moments in it, but for the most part, Bambi is not great, honestly. Over 600 background paintings were made for this film. Most of these depicted beautiful but barren wastelands, which presented a real challenge for the creative team. As one studio press release said, the artists had to create a believable environment in which there was almost no foliage. Whenever possible, Don Bluth's illustrators emphasized vibrant colors. This kept their backdrops from looking too drab or monotonous, despite the desolate desolate setting. For IMDb Nuggets, Spike is the most gluttonous character in the franchise, eating almost any plant and drinking seawater. His impulsiveness gets him into trouble. That's not really trivia. I'm sorry. It's just, I mean, first off, who the fuck gives a fuck about the rest of this franchise? It's terrible, but it's not like a factoid. That's not like interesting. It's like, yes, that's a character trait. Like, he is gluttonous. He eats a bunch. He doesn't talk. I don't know if he ever actually eventually talks. I don't really care, but whatever. Okay, so on to info and ratings. Opening weekend, 7.5 million. Worldwide gross, 84.8 million. IMDb rating, 7.4. Letterboxd rating, 3.8. Rotten Tomato critics score, 65%. Rotten Tomato audience score, 79%. Personal rating, 5 out of 5 stars. This is an all-time classic children's movie despite it having created endless trauma for millennials over the years. I really enjoy the voice cast, especially that of Judith Barcy, whose enthusiasm was very infectious. Although it is a very simple story, it does keep the excitement going throughout. For criticism, I don't feel as though Sarah's actions toward the end of the movie do enough to exonerate her for all of the annoying things that she does and says before it. Just saying. I'm team anti-Sarah. I'm not even as much in favor of the other characters as I am against Sarah. I just want to make that, I can't have hammered that home more, but whatever. All right, everyone. Thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Bye now.
I'm here to welcome you.